Hi, welcome to Fertility Talks. I'm your host, Mary Wong, and I'm a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, founder of Alive Holistic Health Clinic, author of Pathways to Pregnancy, and your life and fertility coach. Today, I am so thrilled and pleased to have someone who's across the pond with us today. And it's never so far away when you're online. So it's really awesome. And I want to welcome Naava Carman, who is an obstetric and fertility acupuncturist out of the UK. And she has over 20 years of practice, so highly skilled. So I'm really thrilled that you're here with us today, Naava. And your preferred group of people that you see and specialize in are women that are 38 to 45. And, just to make it challenging for yourself, I know that you love to see fertility through the lens of immune system. So I'd love to hear more about that. And specifically, we're going to talk about endometriosis today. So welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Delighted to be here.
Is there anything that you want to add to who you are as a human being?
I'm a big fan of a good curry. Does that count?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're just at the end of a heat wave here in London. So I'm delighted to actually be in a room. I did some filming earlier this week and the room was so hot I had to stop for a repowder every 5 minutes. So I'm delighted that we're now in some reasonable filming weather.
Right. Well, I'm sitting in my sunroom and my sunroom is not air conditioned. The rest of my house is. So hence I'm wearing shorts underneath, which thankfully nobody will see. But yes, thank you for joining us. And we're talking about something very important. Endometriosis, you may not know, but it is really prevalent in our society. And, some people walk around, they don't even know they have endometriosis until they're having troubles conceiving perhaps, or if they're experiencing a heck of a lot of pain and they go to their doctors and, how do you diagnose this? But this is your show today, so I'm going to get you to speak more about it. So the very first thing is, what is endometriosis?
So in terms of women's experience, endometriosis is usually associated with pain and with potentially all sorts of things from a raised body temperature to a thyroid problem, strange bleeding patterns, bowel issues. So the experiential experience of endometriosis is never a pleasant one for women. That said, as you've already alluded to, sometimes I have ladies who come in and they have what turns out to be diagnosed quite severe endometriosis, but yet they will never have experienced any kind of pain. And I think that's a really interesting point to make, that we are all individuals. And so we look at endometriosis not as a blanket thing that if you don't have these symptoms, you don't have it, because we have to treat everybody as an individual. And sometimes as an acupuncturist and herbalist, the only way I'm diagnosing endometriosis is looking at a temperature chart the client brings me. And you've probably seen these charts yourself. They have a particular look to them. They're very erratic. And one of the big things is that they don't fall down as they're supposed to with the period. Ideally, a temperature chart would fall down at the beginning of a cycle, and it doesn't. So what is endometriosis? That's from a client or a patient point of view. From a more technical, from a Western point of view, endometriosis is something called retrograde menstruation, which is a fancy technical term basically for blood going up the wrong way and for all sorts of immunologically sensitive cells implanting on the lining of the uterus and then growing from there where they should not really be. And the upshot of that is that there's all sorts of issues with progesterone, which is a commonly talked about hormone. So we know the progesterone receptors inside the uterus of someone who has endometriosis don't always work as well as they should, which leads to a state of something we call estrogen dominance, too much estrogen in the body, even in very young women. And the other thing that it does is it causes a whole cascade of immunological problems. And lots of women have retrograde menstruation. So I always ask myself the question when I started this job, why is it that some women have endometriosis and some don't? And that's something we can get into later if you'd like.
Oh, absolutely. We need to get into that. Now, you wrote to me and we called this endometriosis and is surgery a cure or solution, or, is that the answer? But the other thing that you alluded to today that perhaps you had an epiphany about was tied to the emotional realm. So you said, endometriosis and anger, necessary companions to healing. I'd love to hear more about what you have to say with regards to that.
We may open up a can of worms here, because I think this little bit becomes, endometriosis and feminist agenda, but here we go.
That's okay.
So, yeah. What's really interesting to me from a Chinese medicine point of view is that the emotion associated most with endometriosis is anger. And that relates to the liver and to wood. There's a whole little tie-in there. So the wood element has got to do with keeping qi flowing smoothly, with new beginnings, with that bursting of energy. And the emotion when that liver energy is out of balance is anger. And so when I see clients with endometriosis, I always talk to them about anger. And I think society has evolved, or is at the point where a lot of women have trouble expressing anger, partly because they don't know what to do with it themselves. They haven't been brought up with a parental model of how to express a healthy amount of anger and how to deal with it. And also because society is just not, I don't think, particularly men, are not very good at dealing with an angry woman. An angry woman becomes difficult, menacing, troublesome. You put your head above the parapet. What do you deal with? How do you deal with an angry woman except by tearing her down, belittling her, making her emotions less? And so when I look at anger and endometriosis, I dig into this with clients, because in a lot of cases, there's a lot of anger there when you have endometriosis. Sometimes it's cause, sometimes it's effect. Sometimes you're just pissed off because you've got this horrible disease that you're having to deal with, and you've got to deal with the anger around being subjected to something you didn't want and can't cope with. And sometimes the anger is the cause, or part of the cause, of endometriosis, stuff that you haven't dealt with in your life, that you've tucked inside and tucked away, and that has turned into something that becomes a companion to endometriosis. And because I don't think you can take the mind and the body away from each other, and because as women, so many of us have been brought up to be good and sweet and kind and look pretty and not show any of the stuff we're dealing with, particularly not anger, I think all that stuff doesn't get dealt with properly. And sometimes to heal, you've got to do the mind-body stuff. You've got to particularly delve into that liver energy, that anger energy, in order to be able to manage or get on top of the endometriosis that you experience in your life.
Love that. And if any of you have been with me for a while, I've always talked about, when we suppress our emotions, anger being one of them, over prolonged periods of time. And as you say, as looking pretty and looking good, culturally and socially, it's not so acceptable to walk around with anger or, emoting everywhere we go. And certainly not at work and at school, when you're starting out as a young child. So this accumulation or this contraction of energy internalized in our bodies, they percolate, and it has to go somewhere. And for those women that are more prone or liable towards it, then, things like endometriosis can proliferate, right?
Absolutely. And even when it comes to secondary infertility and endometriosis, some of the conversations that I think we should be having and we don't have is about how tough it is to be a mum, particularly a working mum, right? And how it's not always plain sailing or lovey. And sometimes you cross at your kids, and you cross about the life you have because of those children, however much they're wanted. And to deal with some of those issues as what it means to be a mother and a woman and a working mum, and trying to also be a partner and do your self-care, all of that stuff has to be dealt with. And then the endometriosis is able to be dealt with too.
Yes, it's great. And I always look at it as an opportunity, when you're experiencing pain, and because, that's the biggest symptom associated with endometriosis. Yeah. The more we provide ourselves opportunities for changing our way of being. And a lot of times, people come in and they'll say, oh, what more can we do? What more can we do? And we're doing it, and you're likely doing all the right things because, of course, you're type A and you're going to do everything under the sun. But what gets left behind is the way of being and dealing with the emotional aspect. So really, thank you for bringing that piece in. I think it's huge.
Thank you.
Okay, so then going back to surgery, right? So a woman's trying to get pregnant, they're having pain, she's not, month in, month out, there's no pregnancy. So doctor says maybe we should do a laparoscopy, perhaps just cleaning you out, that will be the solution. What are your thoughts on that?
Mixed, I think. The UK doesn't have a great track record for diagnosing endometriosis. Without going into massive statistics, there's an inconsistency of diagnosis. I don't know if it's the same in America, but there's an inconsistency of diagnosis in the UK, which means that it's either missed or it's not dealt with completely, or the right surgeons aren't present for the operation. Often endometriosis presents on a bowel and on the ureterosacral ligaments, as well as around the uterus or the ovaries. And so there are complications because they go in there and the right surgeon isn't present, because a surgeon who will deal with a bowel is different to a surgeon who will deal with a uterus. And the gold standard is now the MRI in the UK to examine where the endometriosis is, to know where it is before you go into surgery. But that's not available on the NHS, on the National Health Service. It's only available privately, and they cost a fortune, right?
Yes. So this is not, I don't know about in the States, because just so you know, we're actually in Canada. But in Canada, no, I've never even heard of one person being diagnosed through an MRI. It's always just through laparoscopic surgery. So that's very interesting to note. And also interesting to note that it's only through private insurance that there people are accessing this, right?
And it's fairly new, but it makes such a huge difference. I had a client quite recently who'd had 2 failed laparoscopies. And when I say failed, I mean she was still in just as much pain and in just as much discomfort the month after surgery. And then she had an MRI with one of the doctors I work with, one of the consultants. And what we discovered was there was systemic endometriosis in a place that she wasn't ever examined before. And she had 4 surgeons in there, and now has conceived naturally as a result, because they knew exactly where to go and what to do. So I absolutely think surgery has a really important place, but it's a place in a spectrum.
I agree.
So I think the foundational stuff, that if endometriosis is really bad, having a laparoscopy is a miracle for us as practitioners, I think, because it's sometimes like starting the clock from the beginning, and we have a chance to change the underlying pathology that leads them to having all these symptoms in the first place. And although I don't always get because you don't operate unless you have to, right? So if a woman has become asymptomatic, you don't operate again. So I don't always get to see the effect of what I do. But on the number of occasions that I have got to see a repeat laparoscopy done as standard, then I can see that the work that my client and I do together in this relationship we make over that 6 months, let's say, does have an effect on the regrowth and on the endometrium, the proliferative and secretory cells, on all sorts of aspects that are measurable when you do a laparoscopy. And that always kind of gives me hope when I see that, because it tallies in with what I think, which is that if we get enough time to work with women, we can change the body's makeup so as to either symptomatically ease or even deal with those symptoms that therefore don't reoccur and they don't need another laparoscopy.
Right. And I love it that you say that, because in truth, you're right. Because one of the things is you actually have to go in through laparoscopy. And when we work, it's not like, okay, well, in 6 months, go back for another laparoscopy and let's see how well we've done. So we don't
like a blood test, right, where you can check.
Yeah. So, what we do really as TCM practitioners, doctors, we look at, you get to actually check out your own symptoms and your basal body temperatures and, your symptoms, if you're spotting, if you're not spotting, or, things should shift.
Yeah.
If there's 0 shift, then yes, maybe we need to look at something else, but there should be progress, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, when it comes to fertility, though, I find that, gosh, Mary, I've been working for you 6 months and I'm still not pregnant. But yet when we look back, it's like, okay, we can focus in on the belly and on the baby that you don't have, or we can actually focus on the progress. It's like, well, guess what? There's less spotting, there's less pain, there's less flooding of the menstrual period. Like, we got to look at all those aspects. And as you say, the basal body temperature can change. And just so you know, we kind of let that fall off the wayside, because I find with our clients that the whole taking basal body temperature daily in and out, it can cause a lot of stress. So sometimes we just kind of.
You have those monitors that do it automatically?
I'm sorry?
You have the monitors that take a temperature automatically in Canada?
What do you mean?
So we have these machines that I use for a lot of ladies because I do a lot of type A personalities. So doctors and lawyers and bankers and, hardworking women, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so what they have is watches or armbands they wear, and it takes a basal body temperature automatically without them having to do it. It sends it to a computer program and I get to see it. They didn't see it.
Oh, so they're not even watching it.
They can if they want to, but they don't have to. But I get what I need. So there are really interesting things out there, like tools that kind of work for us both. Yeah.
Right. Garmin and Fitbit probably has that.
Something like that. Yeah, it's that sort of thing.
Okay, that's
in terms of what you were saying about time, I always think healthy mum equals healthy baby, right? It's the environment that is so important. And if you have had a lifelong or, from menarche onward, experience of having endometriosis in your body, and you're so used to the Western medical model, which is take a pill, get an effect, then it's really hard sometimes to get your head around the fact that what we're trying to do is change everything, and that takes time. So I think for me, it's all about prepping I don't take on any clients unless it's for a minimum of 3 cycles, because I know that's the absolute minimum time I need to make a change.
Absolutely.
So I think it's like conversations like the one you and I are having, where fertility specialists have a consensus about the fact that it takes us time, becomes so important, because then it's not misrepresenting to the public what we're capable of doing, but that it's really important that what we do is measurable, that you can see a change. It's not like, having a pat on the head and walking away and thinking you feel better. There are actually things that it's really important to see change, as you say, less spotting, less pain, and then you're going on the right road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So then we talked about how you really look at the immune system. So let's talk about that.
So endometriosis in the immune system is my thing. I'm really interested in it. And it comes for me down to implantation and why there are implantation issues in endometriosis. So let's presume that you've had a laparoscopy, there's been no regrowth, and you're now just waiting. You might have had an IVF cycle, you might not have. Why is there no implantation in there? What's happening in the environment? And that's the bit I'm interested in. So when you have endometriosis, even if it's not proliferative, even if it's not actively growing, there's an immune system change. The cells in the body release something called TNF alpha. I don't want to get too technical, but they attack all the cells in the embryo that will become the placenta, the outside, the trophoblast bit. And so when you have all of these immune system cells that are floating around in the body, it's an unfavorable environment. It's an unfavorable environment for you hormonally. It's an unfavorable environment for you from an implantation point of view. But most importantly, I don't know if everyone knows this, but it creates an unfavorable environment in terms of egg development too. So the quality of the egg is impaired by what's happening systemically in your body from an immune system point of view.
But, we talked about anger. So can you make that relationship with anger and autoimmune?
I'd make the relationship through the word stress. It's a big word, right? But I think about the lifestyle a lot of us lead. It's a screen-based lifestyle, right? Our connection has really become around the internet and the computer and our iPhones or our Android phones. And it has become about being busy as a badge of honor, and about juggling, and about how much can we fit in, how much can we multitask, rather than the monotasking that we usually were able to do in the years past. And so how much of that stress is that liver chi, we call liver chi stagnation? How much of that is the fact that you're kind of like the lowest thing on the priority list? And the time and the space in life that we used to be able to have isn't there anymore in the same way. And so when it comes to thinking about the immune system and stress, there's truckloads of Western medical data about the impact of stress and the triggering that stress can have on the immune system. And of course, endometriosis is kind of an autoimmune disease, right? And when you have one autoimmune disease, you are likely to have more. It's like a little bit of a cascade. So one of the first thing I talk to my clients about is phone hygiene. I don't know if you call it that. Do you call it that?
Bone hygiene?
Phone hygiene, mobile phone hygiene.
Oh, no, we don't say it like that. Okay, so
Okay.
enlighten us.
So lost in translation. So phone hygiene. Phone hygiene for me means taking off all the alerts on your phone. It means training yourself not to check it every 3 seconds. It means getting home, finishing your day, getting home and putting your phone down somewhere else.
Yes.
It means not having your phone right by your bed, so it's the last thing you look at night and the first thing in the morning. So you have it like an alarm. So you're not looking at the blue light of the bright light rather of a screen the whole time, and you've gone back to reading either on a Kindle that isn't lit or like a normal regular book. So it's looking at what you can do to actually turn that fight and flight response engendered by this phone-based lifestyle down. And we talk about that a lot with my clients.
That's great. And, the truth is, not people will all of a sudden get scared by saying, oh my gosh, autoimmune, right? So what we're talking about are ways to have your body say yes versus no, going back into that fight or flight place. So
it's like turning down the volume. So what I'm not saying, when people think about autoimmune, they think about really chronic, serious issues. But don't forget, autoimmune is a spectrum, right? And on the small end of the spectrum, if you like, is the fact that we all have our stress levels just turned up. And that's kind of creating an unfavorable, what we call cytotoxic environment all on its own. So if we can turn down the volume on our stress, on our anger, on our immune system, the cascade from there is massively beneficial.
Absolutely. So I'm going to let you speak a little bit more about how to positively impact implantation, because I have to run and put my plug in because my computer's going to die. So you're going to talk and I'm going to put myself awake. Okay. So I'll be 1 second. You talk.
Okay. So one of the ways that you can positively impact your immune system that I'm really keen on, that is not a huge investment of time or money, is changing how you eat. So we live in a very convenience-based world. I'm going to talk about some of my clients, for example, who get up first thing in the morning. Sometimes they exercise, sometimes they don't. They get on the tube, they commute for an hour to work. They sit in front of their desk. Often they've not had their breakfast before they leave and they're eating maybe in front of their computer. They've worked through their day. They may run out and grab a sandwich at lunch or a small salad or something. They've snacked on the office crisps or chocolate or chips in America, that would be, or chocolate or carb-based and sugar-based things in the afternoon to keep them going. They've gone out for a drink after work, or maybe they've gone to the gym and they've got home and they've heated up a ready meal, a really good quality one, but they've heated up a ready meal in the evening, and then they've crashed into bed with their phone. And there's something about the pace of that day and the food they've eaten and the lack of mindfulness about that food that doesn't really work for the immune system. So doing things, even one small change, like cooking an evening meal, and even if you're cooking that meal on a Sunday and you're spending 2 hours making batch cooking and you've made enough to get you through one good meal a week, or you've got up and you've made a boiled egg while you've been in the shower and you've eaten that with a pot of hummus and some, cucumber or carrot on the way to work. The small but important choices that you can make around food and convenience. So, I'm a working mom. I do a lot of batch cooking. If I'm making a meal in the evening, I'm making extra so I can eat it the next day. Anything you can do to be prepared with the food that's fresh and healthy and preferably organic that you can eat and grab, that makes a huge difference to how you feel and even makes a difference to your mood. So coming back again to that anger and that cycle, I would add into anger, part of anger is anxiety and nervous energy and mood and that kind of low-level, dull anxiety that a lot of my clients come in talking about. And so changing how you eat, you'd be amazed at how that changes the mood that you are in for every day. And without you having to spend a cent with me, if I can give you that advice, that's a huge step you can take that will positively impact your health.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And as I always say as well, it's, yes, we want to do the organic, but it's not just what you eat, it's how we eat. Right? And that's
right.
Exactly what you're alluding to. So thank you for that. And
I kind of think in a way we would all be meat or animal eating vegans. That would be like my ideal.
Animal eating
by that? So I'm not big on the vegan or vegetarian lifestyle simply because of the lack of animal protein and the amount of synthetic protein and what I know that does to the immune system.
Yes.
But I think vegans have it right in the sense of they are really good with vegetables. So
Yes.
if we have a big plate of colorful vegetables and a very relatively small amount of animal protein and good fats, then you're onto a winner. If every plate looks like that colorful, beautiful, vegetable-laden plate with a little bit of protein and fat to keep you going, then that's the best possible diet you could be having.
100% agreed. Yes, and people definitely get confused about what should I eat for my fertility, and then they get really anal, and then they get rid of everything. I had this conversation with one of our other colleagues, and people become so confined to what they choose to eat because this is bad and that is bad. So they stop eating so many things, and a lot of them can actually still be good for them in moderation, right? And when
including a glass of red wine or a cup of coffee, or like, I'm not advocating binge drinking,
no,
but I think there's a lack of fun, right, in life, especially when you're in pain.
yes,
And we know there's a tipping point, right? Too much of those things terrible for endometriosis, but a little bit good for the soul.
absolutely. And I speak to that in my book. And I want to actually add, I want to thank you. You wrote to me and said, my book, Pathways to Pregnancy, for those of you who
which you probably see behind me because
really?
I'm sitting in my office.
Great. Well, you said that it was a book of hope, and I love that, your little book of hope, and that's exactly what it is. And really, it does allude to about having that balanced lifestyle where it's not refraining from everything from under the sun, and then you're just miserable, right?
Totally,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, we
Life's
have to nourish our souls. Yeah, we have to live a little, right?
Right. And your book is like my lending library for exactly that reason, because it's really important sometimes for women to see something in writing that says that, not just me.
Yes.
It's like my backup reference.
I love it. And for those of you who do not know Naava, she is expert, and she's been, I guess, traveling the world teaching about autoimmune and fertility and endometriosis. So I really appreciate your work. And I've just started to open up one of your lectures. I have to admit, I haven't watched it all because, we are all busy.
Right. That's the beautiful thing about playback, though, right? And for people who are busy, they can save this and watch it in their own time. But I am recording all of my teaching, so it will be available on a platform I'm having built sometime in the next few months.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is for practitioners, not
That's
for,
right. Yeah. Although there will be a client arm coming next year.
Right. Well, I'm doing the client/patient arm right now, so you can.
We can
perhaps, I'll send you something you can show it to your patients, and because it's a monthly. So, and in fact, our live monthly, which just occurred last Sunday, it was really awesome. I was talking about the 7 areas of life, and because we're looking about bringing back the joy in your life, and everyone is so hyper focused on getting that baby in their belly that they forget to live, and that's exactly what I speak to and address. And then we look at every arm of that. I call it my 7 stars. So there's 7 aspects or 7 areas of life that really fall by the wayside when we're so hyper focused. So we addressed that, and it was awesome. So if you haven't checked it out, please check it out. You can go on to marywong.life under the coaching section and just click on that. You sign up, you subscribe. Every month I go on and talk about a different topic. And if you subscribe at $29, and to see me, if those of you who know me, is a lot more. So it's well worth it, and it'll be transformational because these are things that you can do for yourself in your life. And it's an experience. So it's not just the how to, do A, B, C, and D, and then you're done. It's really about opening up your heart and transforming your way of being. So please check it out. And thank you again so much, Naava, for being here, and you've given us a wealth of information. I'd love to have you back, and I'm sure our viewers would love to have you back, and we can talk about something else. Okay.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. So everyone, I'm going to be going on holidays. Oh no, next week I still have someone. I'm interviewing Dr. Paul Magarelli from Colorado, and we're going to talk about fertility treatments that are less expensive. And then I'm going to be going to Spain, and we're going to actually look at a fertility clinic there, which I think there's some European countries that are less expensive than in North America. For some reason, North America they just like jack up the prices. So we're going to look at that. So have yourself a great weekend. And for those, again, that are wondering, why the heck are we doing this on Friday? Well, it's because Naava is in the UK. So our time change would not work if I did it on a Wednesday, 8 p.m., where it's in the middle of the night. So
Thank you so much for that. Yeah.
I figured, thank you for being here. Okay, guys, love you. We'll talk to you next week. Go check out my book. Check out, what's your website, Naava?
Fertilitysupport.co.uk.
All right, there we go. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye for now.